Hey, everybody, I am so excited on this incredible early fall day here in the Oakland Hills, and Brad is in San Francisco, to introduce our speaker today, who is Dr. Brad Jacobs. He is a leader in the integrative medicine area. He's also a lifestyle health medicine specialist that focuses a lot on women's health. And he also focuses on resiliency, corporate health. He is you're one of the founding directors, right? And from the UCSF Osher Center, right, Brad, on integrative medicine?
Right.
Which is incredible. I mean, I love that facility. And then everyone, Brad is also a past chair of the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine. And he is the founder of BlueWave Medicine and currently is working there now. And for those of you who remember my interviews with the other co-founder of the Cusp, Taylor Sittler, Brad also is a co-founder of the Cusp, which is an organization in San Francisco and actually now with telehealth really everywhere that focuses on perimenopause and menopause. So without further ado, Brad, welcome and thank you for taking time today to meet with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's great to be here in conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you. So I would love to start, Brad, with you talking to everyone about what makes integrative medicine different. Why should a woman want to find an integrative health area versus just a regular OB or a regular doctor?
Yeah, be happy to talk about that. Just to orient you a little bit, just thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I was the founding medical director at UCSF, which is called the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine, which we started in about 2000, thanks to the generosity of the Osher Foundation. And they went on to seed, I think now 9 different universities throughout the country, which has been great. You know, Northwestern and Harvard and several of the universities, which is really to create this movement around integrated medicine. And it sort of relates to your question, which is why do that and what's that about? And that started, about 20 years ago now from the academic side. And then from that, something called the Academic Consortium was formed, which is a coalition or consortium of academic medical centers that were focused on at least 2 of 3 things: the research, clinical work, or education. So you had to have a dean that was willing to participate, and then have some sort of platform or program related to either a clinical, research, or education. Many of them had all 3. And now there's well over 75 medical centers involved. And they just partner now with Australia, who has their own consortium for academic consortium focused on integrated medicine. So it's really become an international effort, which has been great. And that push was really about how do we more formalize it, integrated medicine. What does it mean? Does it mean alternative medicine? What does it mean, right? So, and how do we research it? How do we teach others about it? And how do we provide clinical care around it? There's a big pushback initially around some certain academic medical centers, UCSF being one of them, even though we're in San Francisco, where everyone's doing acupuncture and massage and shamanic healing and, you name it. But the academic world's very different. It's sort of, they live in their own bubble, and people were very concerned. Isn't this charlatan work, or what is this? So let me define that a little bit to your question. And alternative medicine and holistic medicine. So these are terms that are thrown around, and functional medicine. So you have people that are alternative medicine doctors, or you have functional medicine doctors. You have integrated medicine providers or doctors. So let's start with an early version, which was alternative medicine. And really, alternative medicine simply means, or complementary and alternative medicine, or CAM, C-A-M. Those are all related to conventional medicine. So it means that it's not conventional medicine. That's really all it means. It's non-conventional, not in the world of RNs and MDs, in the biomedical world that we live in. Now, the problem with that definition is that things that were once alternative have become mainstream. Consider psychotherapy. Consider psychedelics for the use of psychotherapy, what they call psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, that's now in a whole bunch of phase 3 clinical trials. There's so much to think about. Massage, And so the list, hypnosis. So it's sort of the problem is that it starts in one bucket and makes its way over to the other bucket. And to this day, how do we think about it? Holistic medicine is another term that people use, or I'm a holistic medicine provider. And that really sort of talks about a heart-centered, comprehensive approach towards healthcare. So that would mean holistic, meaning really much about love being the basis of a lot of healing, that the patient is the center of the relationship, that's an ecosystem sort of emanating from the patient or the person as the center, and they may have peers and colleagues and health providers and all sorts of people that help support them in their health journey. And so holism with an H is still like holy, and it really has to do with, and the term of holism has to do with that sort of 360-degree view. So that's why, like, for example, you mentioned I'm the past chair for what's called the Academy for Integrative Health and Medicine, and that's a holistic medicine and integrative medicine academy, and so the problem with holistic care is in the 70s, it's sort of an older term. So people then came up with the idea, well, why don't we call it integrated medicine? Because what that really means is that we're focused on bringing lots of different disciplines together and considering all of them as possibilities. When we weigh that, what's the scientific evidence behind it, that it works, how safe is it, what does it cost, and what are the other options around, So for example, nausea and vomiting in the setting of chemotherapy, let's say, for treatment for breast cancer. So what can you use? Well, certainly acupressure can be helpful. Certainly ginger can be helpful. Certainly acupuncture has been shown to be helpful, as well as medications, right? Ondansetron, Zofran. So in an integrated medicine orientation would provide all those at your disposal. Whereas sort of that someone that just does alternative, or someone that's a non-MD that doesn't have the prescribing rights or skill to prescribe a medication like Zofran, for example, might use something else like ginger, or if they're an acupuncturist, do acupuncture. So as a recipient, which we all are eventually, because we all become ill at one point and die at one point, as a recipient, or what people call a patient, we want all options available. And so we just need to consider which ones have more merit than others, right? You might not do something that's super toxic when you have better alternatives. And that integrative approach really includes everything. So functional medicine falls under that, acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, conventional medication, lifestyle change. It's all really under the rubric of integrated medicine. And that's really what we're trying to put forth into the world, is a much more comprehensive view of what's possible, and to have somewhat of a stepwise approach. So you might start with lifestyle self-care. Then if that's not insufficient, you might have people help you, maybe that could have their healing hands, whether that's massage or chiropractics or acupuncture or osteopathy or craniosacral. There's so many options, right? Or psychotherapy. And then on top of that, then, okay, what are some biologics you could take by mouth or topically, maybe it's supplements or herbs. Okay, still insufficient, then medications. Okay, still not enough, maybe you need a procedure. So it's sort of a stepwise approach. Most doctors, for better and worse, that are conventionally trained just know the last part. I prescribe medications, I can help you get a procedure done or do surgery. And then the non-conventional folks do all the others. So it's nice to be able to see someone or a practice that does all of that.
Yeah, I love it, especially I mean, when you for folks on the or listening in, Brad was actually going to be a speaker at our April Women's Health panel that was postponed to COVID and then canceled due to COVID. But when we spoke a long time ago, I had mentioned to you I lived in Europe and Asia, and those approaches are very common. It's America, I feel like, that's behind the times in terms of integrating and looking at the woman or the patient from a holistic perspective from the get-go. So I'm super happy to hear your explanation of it. So thank you. Before we move into the main topic around perimenopause and menopause, can you say in one sentence what the difference is? Because I know you've also studied functional medicine, and there was a question that came in this morning. Like, what's the definition of functional medicine?
Yeah, so functional medicine providers, so the way Institute for Functional Medicine is one of the leaders in training in functional medicine, IFM, and they, they have a website, they have a provider list directory if you want to look for providers, and it's a range. You could be a nutritionist getting training there, you could be a doctor, you could be a chiropractor, an acupuncturist. They really allow many different sorts of practitioners to get training. So just to know that. And so you keep that lens when you're seeing someone, because it's not like an MD or an acupuncturist that gets us right there. It's a framework. And that framework of functional medicine is to think about what are some of the biochemical imbalances at its root. It's really about biochemistry. The founder, Jeff Bland, who's a brilliant man and quite forward-thinking, who's moved on to do other things now. But he's a biochemist. And so a lot of it was looking at the biochemistry of our bodies and doing testing to understand that, and then thinking that that's often the root cause, or there are signals within the biochemistry of the body that help us understand the root cause. And then to try and then use typically nutrients to solve for that. So it might be, for example, you have migraines, but your migraine is because you have low vitamin B12. Someone's other migraine might be related to magnesium, and someone else might be related to, let's say, sleep deprivation or food intolerance. And so we would treat each one of those differently. And so it can be very helpful. It's very test-based. So people often get lots of tests done, and often it's a nutrient recommendation, an herb or supplement or something like that.
Oh, that's fantastic, Brad. That was perfect, because I know a lot of people don't really know, and they just hear it as a buzzword, especially in California and the Bay Area, where we're a little bit more open to alternative therapies and, body first, nature first. So thank you. I thought that was a great explanation. So God, we could talk about a plethora of things, everyone, with this man, because he's so brilliant. But I thought, Brad, like we talked about, we could focus on, hormonal imbalance as you move into perimenopause and menopause, and like, what does that mean for a woman? What are some of the signs and symptoms as what's going to tell her that her hormones are out of balance, whether it's estrogen or progesterone?
Yeah, so at the Cusp, which you're familiar with, we've spent a lot of time thinking about this. We're focused on providing care for women transitioning through perimenopause or menopause, and we provide it through a sort of telemedicine platform, so it's much more scalable and affordable. And what we've really honed in on now as a starter is a hormone test, right? So let's do a hormone test that looks at AMH, which is anti-Mullerian hormone, which can be a predictor that sort of prognosticates or helps prognosticate when you might go into menopause. In addition to, we can look at estrogen and progesterone and something called LH, or luteinizing hormone, and FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. But the AMH, which is typically used to look at fertility, actually on the other side of that spectrum, we can predict, depending on the level, when you might have your last menopause, your last menstruation. So what does that all mean? So what it's really helps us understand is what happens to the body, and what tends to happen is that women start to having less and less production of estrogen, and it can be erratic. So it can be on the wane, but all of a sudden go high and then come back down again, and then drop low and then come back up a little bit, and so it's overall the downward slope, but it's stepwise and often with aberrations that come up and down. And we think that some of these symptoms relate to that, these sort of aberrations going up and down. In addition, then you have progesterone, and it's waning as well, but there's often a delta gap between estrogen and progesterone levels. And so that actually leads to, we think, some changes potentially as well, like hot flashes and irritability. So what are some of the symptoms? What do they relate to? We think the erratic nature and the decline of estrogen causing emotional irritability, for example, is a big one for people. So an early sign often for women may be just that they're not having irregular periods yet, let's say. They're not having hot flashes, but they're noticing they're more irritable. They're more prone to have acute, like angry and rageful, and like, where did that come from? Or anxious. And so, now is a stressful time for many reasons. So there's so many overlays here that it's complicated between the
Like
politics
COVID and menopause. This is a whole new chapter in 50 something lives.
in our politics of our world right now.
Yeah,
So it's complicated, but that's, in a nutshell, really what people can think about early on. Often emotional stuff that's coming up, sleep changes. So women get insomnia related to that early on. And then they can start to notice some of these other things start layering in. Hot flashes is the telltale. Everyone knows that. But a lot of times there's things earlier than that they can notice.
Yeah, I love that you brought up irritability, because I think especially for right nowadays, we have more women in corporate America than in the past, and more leaders, entrepreneurials that have high stress jobs, women that own $1 million businesses and such. Um, and I think we forget, we assume that the stress is causing us irritability first, or that our home life, or that our kids or our husband or partners are causing that, instead of looking at, oh, maybe this is something beyond my stress level or my lack of sleep. And maybe my lack of sleep is also due to the imbalances of the hormones. But yeah, what would someone do for, let's say, irritability? What would be, and I know obviously every woman is different, and if you ran those tests, right, depending on what those results came back, what would be some of the things that you would be doing if when women come to BlueWave or to the Cusp?
Yeah. So yeah, my practice is, as you mentioned, BlueWave medicine, and so we have offices here at Cavallo Point, which is wonderful, here at the National Park in Fort Mason, or Fort Baker, here in the southern tip of Sausalito, and then in San Francisco. So we'll see people here or through the Cusp, and a lot of people want testing. So and testing can be helpful, but also sometimes misleading. So let me just speak to that for a moment, and then we could talk about irritability and treatments. So people are like, well, can you give me a test to tell me if I'm in menopause? And there's this new test called the AMH we talked about. Then the old school is, estrogen, progesterone, and they can be helpful, but honestly, they're better for trending, because some women may have been having their estradiol levels. There's estrone, estradiol, and estriol. So the estradiol levels may be 300, and in another woman it might be 50. And so what do you do or make with that? Well, if it's 2, that's telling. But if it's above 20, has a woman always been just running in the 50s, or did she used to be in the 500s and now moved to 50s? And we don't often know. So for trending, it's much better. And if you're going to make a recommendation, let's say you're going to prescribe a bioidentical hormone as a replacement therapy, then you can sort of see how much it bumps up, which doesn't matter that much unless they're having side effects. And then you're like, oh, you're having some unusual effects. We could check your levels. Maybe it's too high. Again, it's helpful, but I know a lot of practitioners that don't use testing at all. So I just want to provide some clarification around that. So back to your question around irritability, I'm always about, like we said early on, let's start with lifestyle change. Let's do the self-care stuff that we can do, that's free, we have full advocacy around, I'm our agency around, like I have the power to do it for myself. And so, I'll just relate to what I created something called the 6 pillars of healthy living. That's really common sense, but not common practice, which is, movement and posture and movement and activity are really helpful. Exercise can be really helpful. And this diet can be really helpful, because sweets, while we crave them, they can also increase our irritability. So simple carbohydrates, for example. And for other folks, sometimes they're allergic to or have intolerances to certain food groups. So that's also important to look at. You may get irritable when you eat wheat, or perhaps it's from corn or soy. And so that's important to look at as well. And then sleep. So clearly, it's a chicken and egg phenomenon. The more stressed and irritable I am, the less I sleep. So what can we do around that? And the self-care approach is really around meditation, yoga, Tai Chi. Or if you love, like I have a patient recently who said, look, I tried Tai Chi, I got the app Headspace that you recommended, which is a great app. But I really enjoy my piano. Like when I play my piano every day, I'm in my sweet spot, I'm in flow. And so that's great. So there's lots of different, components. And then relationships, it's so important. And you talk about COVID now with our social sort of distancing. And it's really around physical distancing, but the side effect is we are socially distancing as well, right? So our physical distancing, which is what I wish we coined it, has resulted in social isolation, right? A social distancing, which makes it harder for us, particularly extroverts. If you're an extrovert, if you're an introvert, you might be happier. If you're an extrovert, which many of us are, it's a more challenging. And then beyond that is what things could we do by mouth? But before that might be acupuncture, right? Massage and things like that. There are herbs and supplements that can be quite helpful. Some of them, for example, that are quite calming can be things like rhodiola, ashwagandha, and a lot of things. Those are sort of from Ayurvedic or Indian traditions, and they're very nutritive. So they help sort of support the energy in the system, and at the same time calming, and have a wonderful effect. Some people use things like passion flower, kava, and these things are more anti-anxiolytic, if you will. L-theanine, which comes from green tea extract, which is very calming for the mental system, if you will. Sort of it'll calm our nervous system down, give us some mental acuity, so actually more clear thinking, but also calmer. L-theanine. So there's a range, and a lot of things that affect the GABA system, for example, which is the calming part of our nervous system.
Oh my gosh, you could just go on for hours on this topic. I know, because you're just the plethora, and I love that you brought the ashwagandha and rhodiola. I'm a big believer in Ayurveda after spending time in India, and just I love that particular approach because it really does look at individuals, and their constitution of maybe you do well with broccoli, but I do better with asparagus. So it forces the individuals to really look at their body awareness of how they're assimilating food and what works and what doesn't. And then the other uh, items that you listed are fantastic for our viewers. So thank you. So then, okay, so we've talked about that lifestyle, right? And then going into herbs or supplements. What would be the next level of the hierarchy?
Yeah, so we talked about different providers and types you mentioned too, right?
Yep.
So, and then that's all insufficient. I really do a couple laps around those. Okay, let's really see what we can bolster, because then at that point we're moving more into medications, right? So maybe it's Lexapro, for example, which is really great for anxiety, and can help with, therefore irritability. Often irritability its root is from anxiety or from depression, right? So you can be irritable from either of those roots. And so often Lexapro as a single medication can be helpful for that. And often there's a lot of midlife crisis happening too. There's sort of reflection on where I am in my life. Either I never had children, what does that mean for me? Or I've had children, now they're leaving the house. And I've got to relate to my spouse who I didn't have to relate to for 20 years. Now I need to. And what does that mean for me? What have I done in my life? And there's all that. So sometimes psychotherapy can be really helpful as well. So there's a lot here. And so the next step would be really medication, really once you've sort of exhausted these other ones. But in all honesty, a lot of times what I end up doing is we'll start medication, and then I'll say, now you're in a little bit of a better place. Let's go back down again and look at getting you more regular with your exercise, or let's look again at getting you a 10-minute yoga routine before bed every night. Just 10 minutes, doesn't have to be an hour, but every night, 10 minutes, or turning off your screens within 90 minutes before bed. Screen time's off. You set an alarm. The alarm says it's time to go to bed, and then you switch into your PJs and you light your candles, whatever works for you, get in the bath and start your evening routine. Like, let's really do another lap through that. And often then over time, if they're successful, the medication actually can be weaned because they found other routines.
Yeah, I think there's so much power and patience with the alternative and the lifestyle approaches, and then even the herbs and stuff. I would agree with you, because I've heard many women, and myself included, with my very dramatic situation due to surgically induced menopause. But I think when you give lifestyle and supplements a chance, it really can make a difference. And the power of the ritual that you just mentioned, just a bedtime ritual and not doing TV or computer or texting or social media before bed, and really having a ritual, and then kind of just consistency. I know that there's some girlfriends and I that even after COVID, we'll do our Zoom workouts every day and our meditation every morning. And I can't tell you the difference that that has made in the groundedness of me throughout my day, just having that ritual. So yeah, thank you for
Great.
mentioning that.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to, I know we're getting closer to time, because again, we don't want to, we'll come back. And you guys, I do want to let you know also, Brad is the co-author of this cookbook. I posted one of the recipes on social media today because it's really yummy, and it's still so nice out. It's a fennel citrus salad. It's super good.
Thank you.
And he has a whole program in there called the 4 R's, and we'll have him back again to talk about inflammation and how that plays into general health. But staying on the topic of menopause today, what do you want to talk about next, Brad? Do you want to go into a little bit on, there's so much confusion around bioidenticals and identicals and that kind of hormone therapy, hormone replacement therapy?
Yeah, I think that'd be
Okay,
great. You read my
fantastic.
mind. Yeah, you read
Great.
my mind.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to spend a couple minutes on that, most hormone replacement therapy these days is bioidentical, whether it comes as a commercial drug that you get at Walgreens or you get it from a compounding pharmacy. And most people don't realize that, me included, up to several years ago. I always thought that bioidentical hormones only occurred in a compounded pharmacy. The truth is, they both are getting estradiol, so beta hydroxy estradiol, 17 beta hydroxyestradiol, and that is a bioidentical hormone. And the reason we call it bioidentical is because they used to get their estrogen, they meaning the pharmaceutical drug companies, would get it from pregnant horses' urine. So the urine from pregnant horses had a whole bunch of different estrogens in it, none of which were our type of estrogen, by the way. And they would put that into a pill and give it to women. And some of the research we think, the reason some of the research we think didn't look as good as it could back then, and why people were all up in arms about this may be causing harm in women, is because it wasn't our own bioidentical hormone. In addition, the progesterone used back then was at much higher doses and is much lower dosing, and changed sort of the manufacturing, the formulation of the progesterone as well. So the current formulation of bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, whether you get it from a compounded pharmacy or you get it, the Vivel patch or the other patches that are out there, or pill, is using the same medicinal. And the only difference is some women have issues. They are allergic to the adhesive on the patch, or there's artificial colors used on the pills. And so there's certain reasons, and the dosing is harder to really refine the dosing. And so for those reasons, those women will use a compounded form. They'll go to a pharmacy that makes the batch for them, and they'll put it in a different vehicle. Typically it's a topical, and they use a coconut oil. They use these other cream base to create a cream that are very hypoallergenic. So that's the difference between compounded and non-compounded. There's concerns about certain compounding pharmacies not doing things the way they're supposed to. And that is a concern. I will say there's a couple pharmacies out there that I really have a lot of respect for, that I do have no personal financial relationship with. One being Koshland Pharmacy, Peter Koshland, and Koshland Pharmacy is great.
Yeah, he spoke at one of my women's health panels. So
Okay.
he's fantastic. And that's a family owned business. And he takes so much pride in the quality, and uh, like you, he truly has a passion, I believe, deep down to help women. I mean, he really, so anyway, so Koshland, okay, go ahead. What's another
Yeah.
one?
The Women's Health International is another one. WHI is another good one as well. And so, and there are others, but and then so there's some good ones out there. It's important to find a good one. Koshland, is great. They're local here in the Bay Area. They'll ship next day. They do great customer service. They're really responsive. The pharmacists are really knowledgeable. And so I would go to use those therapies in women that are having more than one issue, So, if someone's having hot flashes, you could say, well, try black cohosh or try Siberian rhubarb, and you're having irritability, we talked about options there. And then they're having some vaginal dryness, maybe, which usually happens later on, but you could do, whether it's coconut oil or they have intravaginal estrogen, which women with breast cancer can use too. Now they have a lower dose that's approved for women with breast cancer.
Yeah,
Intravaginal.
I had to do that because it's drastic when you get
Yeah.
forced into
Yeah. I mean, for surgical
that
menopause or
area.
chemo-induced menopause, it can be dramatic. And in menopause, it tends to happen after a year or two or three. It's not the early side of it. But then after a while, you're like, if assuming you don't have a risk, assuming you've done the risk assessment around the cardiac risk and breast cancer risk, and you meet the criteria, and there's more than one or two indications, you might as well just do bioidentical hormone replacement therapy instead of taking 8 different herbs and doing all these things you have to do, which honestly, estrogen replacement therapy, and if you have a uterus then with progesterone as well, is the answer, because it helps the brain, it helps the bones, it helps the heart, it helps all these other symptoms you're having, right? Whether it's vaginal dryness or hot flashes or irritability, all of it. So now you've got one thing that you're doing that's solving for multiple issues.
Right. And I know Dr. Risa Kagan, who spoke at one of the first panels I had, and Peter were talking, and I think definitely there's controversy around it, and I think the doctors like you and others that are trying to debunk it, right, from the women's study back in the 70s, that just the data was misinterpreted for the most part on the people who were doing that test. So there's a lot of benefits to it as seen with modern day physicians. I remember one of the doctors talking about it actually behooves a woman to actually start that at a earlier age, like at a certain point. If she's already, say, 10 years into menopause, you can't really go back, right? So can you speak a little bit on the timing of that, and when
Yeah.
is too late for women to go back to HRT?
Yeah. So within 10 years, so you want to start hormone replacement therapy within 10 years of your last period, when you went into menopause, I should say, which is 12 months after your last period. So within 10 years, and the sooner the better, for many reasons, because it's hard to gain back what you've lost already, but the risk is thought to actually increase past 10 years if you start it beyond 10 years. And again, nowadays it's very straightforward. Most docs don't do it. We do it at the Cusp, and of course I do it in my practice, which is you just do the risk assessments. You look at your breast cancer risk. There's a tool online you can figure out. You can use that risk scale to see if you're below 2.5%, or over 10 years, or is it between 2.5% and 5%, in which case it's sort of the gray zone. It's very straightforward, and then it's clear. And the data, we'll see it in the next 5 years. It'll come out, and mark my words, I could be wrong, but my nickel, and from the research I've read already, says that actually women do better when they're taking estrogen and plus progesterone. The real culprit, we think, might be the progesterone. So for women that don't have a uterus, they don't need the progesterone, because that protects, that we do that to protect against uterine cancer. So they can just do the estrogen. And estrogen alone, we think, actually reduces risk in many people for breast cancer, actually, which seems opposite. But so we actually think it's quite favorable.
Well, I can tell you, and Mindy, because she was on the staff at the Cusp, and also a very highly sought after doctor at UCSF. I had to wait 6 months to see her, but she works with a lot of breast cancer patients and dealing with the hormone, not being able to have hormones, and so that tiptoeing around it. And I will tell you, my brain was in a really bad state at a certain point, and we negotiated with my oncologist to go on a very low dose patch of estrogen, and that really helped get me over the hump. And then just rigorous lifestyle changes to help. But I was astonished with the amount of brain impact that these hormonal imbalances cause in women. And I had no idea until I researched and then started these panels and get to interview all of you brilliant geniuses that help us navigate this stuff. So
Absolutely. And I'll just say there's a group out of Cornell, some neuroscientists doing amazing work looking at just that. impact of estrogen on the brain and the lack and how the absence of estrogen and its effect on the brain and cognitive function.
Oh, wow. What's their name? What's the doctor's name?
You know, I'd have to pull her name back
Or,
up again.
okay, I'll find out from you after. I'll find out from you after. That would be fascinating because I want women to thrive well into their 90s. I want the data that you just put a nickel on to be like the women who are taking heed in their 20s and 30s and learning about the symptoms and taking care of themselves so that they can thrive in their 50s and beyond. Like I really want that for everyone. So Brad, I could talk to you forever, and I know the audience wants to keep hearing, but we will have you back. And just for everyone, remember you can find Brad at BlueWave Medicine, right? Is it bluewave.com? BlueWaveMedicine.com?
Yeah, BlueWave Medicine.
BlueWave Medicine, and they're also, you'll see in the Instagram and Facebook posts, I'll put the @ so we can connect you with their social media as well. And then of course, the Cusp, which you guys have heard me talk about before. And if you work in corporations, I forgot to mention when I introduced Brad, but he's a leader in bringing integrative and functional medicine ideation and programs to large corporations. So he has brought things to Facebook, Google, Gap, former employer, PG&E, Stanford and Harvard business schools on their executive programs, as well as Stanford and UCSF medical schools. So, and other companies as well, Lilly Pharmaceuticals, and I think some others. But he's a plethora of knowledge. And Brad, I'm so grateful for your time today. Thank you so much.
No, it's my pleasure. And, I've enjoyed doing this work one-on-one, doing this work, with corporations really focused on resiliency and helping them become resilient, corporations and individuals in those corporations. And I'm thankful for people like you that are giving a lot of, exposure to what honestly used to be considered, hush hush in the closet and had a lot of stigma around. And it's important to bring this out. Women naturally go through menopause, and it's important to be able to thrive and be your best during this phase. And there's nothing to be timid about. So I thank you for bringing that into the light.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, we'll see you soon, okay?
Bye-bye.